where I'd love to start is just a reflection on what has been achieved over the last 2 decades. I'll stop saying decades. This probably doesn't feel great. um, it's really easy for us as operators get dragged down into how slow and lethargic everything feels, but maybe that's not what you walk away with when you reflect on the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember those events at Gateway as well, and I've been honored to work with you on the board and look forward to seeing what you develop after I step away at the organization. But to yeah, you're absolutely right. As an operator, I really understand that it's easy to get caught up in day to day. It's easy to follow the fast moving progress that's happening at the state or local level but when you look at federal law, yes, it's a very long game. As I reflect on the last 15, 20 years, we've made incredible progress, even since the last 10 years. And when you talk about the 2015, but if you go back 20 years, when I first started doing this work with the Marijuana Policy Project, even the California delegation of Democrats in Congress were largely opposed, not just to adult use, but to medical cannabis. And my job at that time was lining up patients to chase members of Congress around the state and show up at their town halls and such and tell their story around medical cannabis, how that was helping them through their lives, and just trying to, it seemed like such an uphill battle. I think we had two members of Congress that would actually publicly express support for adult use. And fast forward to today, we have almost the entire Democratic delegation in the Congress. I think they're safe, but maybe one, and a lot of Republicans supporting this. We probably have a majority in the House for support for reform. And it's just the challenge ahead of us now is keeping the foot on the gas as an industry, but also just the challenges that every interest group and every advocacy group faces, which is that Congress is somewhat dysfunctional and we need to overcome that. But the fact that we're at a place where both the president and almost every member of Congress has expressed some support for some kind of reform is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, actually brings me a little optimism thinking about it because it does get frustrating and we often talk about how slow things move, but what you're talking about is that there has been a massive shift in people's minds and in Washington. It just we haven't seen it translate into policy reform quite yet. But I do believe it's coming, and I'm sure people that are fighting for it are remaining hopeful. When I think about when I met you, we were both around the Bay Area. I was a young entrepreneur. I just started my first cannabis business in Oakland. It was probably 2009 or 2010, somewhere around there. And I thought of myself as an entrepreneur and not an activist or an advocate. And pretty quickly, I realized that to be a cannabis entrepreneur meant that I also needed to be an advocate and an activist. And I think it was people like you that helped people that were coming to the space with an entrepreneurial slant to see that. And I'd love to hear from you about what that journey was all about of creating coalitions between entrepreneurs and patients and activists and lawmakers, how you were able to create the bridges to get people to work together and see that we all needed each other at that time in order to create opportunity.
Yeah, I think I remember those days, and I think you were probably maybe what I would consider the second wave of cannabis industry entrants, which were business people that decided to make something of this industry in those early days. The wave before that were folks that were the opposite. They were activists. They really had a passion for the plant, probably not a lot of as much business acumen. And at the beginning, it was this landscape on the advocacy side consisted of the Marijuana Policy Project, NORML, and Americans for Safe Access as the kind of three primary groups, ASA being more medical focused. And these were groups that were funded by funded by philanthropists rather than industry interests. And there started to be a kind of a rift around that 2009, 10, 11 timeframe where we saw business, actual capital investment flowing into this industry. Places like Colorado and Washington were opening for-profit stores, which hadn't existed in California yet, and really just changed the whole paradigm where we did get this kind of influx of interest from what at the time seemed like serious business people, but there wasn't this connection to the advocacy movement. But I think what NCIA really did was try to bridge that by providing an understanding of the policy changes that needed to happen and the path toward making those changes happen in order for the industry to be successful, but also providing sort of just tangible ROI to members outside of the policy work, knowing that the policy work is such a long game, but our members needed immediate benefit. So creating events, creating member discounts, all those sorts of things. And frankly, I was sitting around with the co-founders of this organization at the time, and we were thinking like, let's Google what trade associations are. We didn't. What do other trade associations do? I didn't know. We were cannabis advocates, and the model we looked at the beer and wine wholesalers, as other kind of comparable groups, and modeled NCIA as just a mini version of that. And I think really, and then taking some of the advocates that were involved in this space long before NCIA, and through events and other networking opportunities, connecting them to entrepreneurs so that to share that knowledge, but also share it both ways, so that those that were really super early entrants in the market still had an opportunity to succeed from learning from the larger ecosystem. And it's all about just being stronger together and raising all boats, so to speak, for the industry.